What's up, WAP? Okay, back at it, finishing up this part one lecture here. So, one of the major feelings that emerges in this time period is nationalism. And a nationalism is a sense and pride in your nation state, in people of your same ethnicity, nationality. And nationalism is something that is very, very prevalent today. When you have pride in your country, oftentimes it's called patriotism, but in the time period in which still many empires existed, nationalism actually was an agent for rebellion, because there are many empires that have many different nationalities, and the different nationalities that are especially different than the king or the ruler of the empire may look to seek their own independence, and that's exactly what happens in many parts of the world. For example, a place in which a empire exists is in the Americas, the Spanish Empire. The Spanish were our most successful colonizers of the Americas in the first era of colonization between 1450 and 1750. And therefore, we have all of these Spanish controlled lands. But the people living in this empire, the majority of them don't identify as Spanish. Obviously, we have Native Americans, we have people brought over from West Africa with slavery. And then we also have many different mixed race peoples that are born in the Americas, and that have their children are born in the Americas and their children's children, and so on and so forth. And so we don't really have a tremendous amount of connections between the people living in this empire and the Spanish, except for the fact that the highest people, the highest positions, the governmental positions in this empire are peninsulares, people that are born in Spain. And this is going to cause a lot of resentment from the people that are living here, because they're saying, why are we, for instance, the people in Mexico, why are we being told what to do by the Spanish when the Spanish are all the way 3,000 miles away? We were born here, we were raised here, and so this is going to create some rebellious and revolutionary sentiments. We have lots of reasons for this. One is economics, mercantilism. The Spanish are requiring the people living in the Americas to buy manufactured goods only from Spain, and you could only sell their raw materials like gold or silver or lumber or tobacco. You could only sell those to Spain at low prices, and then they would be resold throughout Europe. And so this is going to cause frustration, especially in people that own land in the Americas. And the people that own a lot of land in the Americas tended to be our Creole class. That means that we should revisit this social structure over here. Up at the top of the social structure are peninsulares. They're the least numerous in all of the Americas. And the peninsulares were people that were born on the Iberian Peninsula. They were born in Europe, particularly Spain and Portugal, and then they came over to the Americas. Immediately, because of their race and ancestry, they are the highest people in the society, in Spanish society. Below them are Creoles. They're 100% European, but they're born in the Americas. But because they're born in the Americas, let's say they're born in Mexico, they have an attachment to Mexico. They feel as though they are Mexican. They were born there. They are around people that are also Mexican. And because of this, they feel a sense of nationalism and feel a frustration that they're being told what to do by Spain. And especially because these people tended to have more money, wealthy landowners, mine owners, business people, and yet they were having to be limited by how much money they could make because of Spain's mercantilist policies. Thus, Creoles tended to be leaders of these revolutions in the Americas. Of course, they also want upward mobility. They're frustrated that peninsulares got the best jobs. And so because of this, our Creoles are going to lead revolutions. Now, sometimes they were resistant to bring in lower classes into their revolutions. And the reason being is because these Creoles were upper middle class. They had a tremendous amount of wealth and power already. And if they allowed the lower classes into their revolutions, they feared that they would have to give up some of their power when the revolution was realized, when the revolution was over. For instance, if you look at Haiti, the Haitian Revolution is successful. They defeat the French, and then they had to divide all of the land up equally amongst all of the people there. If you were someone that previously had a lot of land, all of a sudden you've lost a lot of land to the lower classes. And so our Creoles, for the same reason, um, were most resistant to the Spanish, but also at the same time wanted a more moderate revolution and thus often restricted the lower classes from being part of their rebellion. One such Creole example is Simon Bolivar. Simon Bolivar, he's born in Venezuela, and he is independently wealthy. His parents were in Spain, and he went to Spain. He was educated in Spain. And as many of our leaders in these revolutions were, learn of the ideas of the Enlightenment when they were in Europe. They hear about natural rights. They hear about this desire to apply reason to political structures and to stop listening to these divine kings. And because of this, he's going to use his wealth to raise an army and fight against the Spanish and push them out of the southern tip of South America. He forms this huge, large new land, this new country called Gran Colombia, and he is going to model its government after the United States. He's going to have three branches of government. He's going to serve as the president there. He's going to abolish slavery. After he dies, Gran Colombia will turn into three different countries. It will turn into Ecuador, Colombia, and Venezuela as they are today. So another Creole revolution inspired by the Enlightenment, and that is true of many, many different revolutions that occurred throughout the Spanish Empire. Unfortunately, however, after these new nations in Latin America become independent, there often were struggles for power after independence, especially because people like Simon Bolivar would use lots of money and wealth to raise an army and get this new land. And then the people that followed those generals, those revolutionary leaders, oftentimes looked to them as the leaders of their new country. And so because they weren't elected, technically they're military dictators, and these are called caudillos. And caudillos ruled over Latin America for large, large periods. There's lots of unrest because revolutions led by these caudillos would cause just another caudillo leading over these countries. Unfortunately, one of the groups that did not gain very much after these revolutions were women. Latin American women were very oppressed, not given much political power, not given much education. There are, of course, exceptions to this, and we'll go over a couple of them. One of them is Manuela Sáenz. Manuela Sáenz was an excellent rider. She was an excellent shot. She was an excellent warrior, and she actually served as a soldier in Simon Bolivar's army. They fell in love. She actually saved him in a battle in 1822 from being stabbed in the back after he had fallen off his horse. And from that point forward, she was called the liberator of the liberator. She was promoted to a colonel in his army and was a leader of men. And so we did have obviously some exceptions. However, this was women were a group that did not gain very much from the natural rights that was supposed to be promoted. The Enlightenment ideal is supposed to be promoted after independence. Spain is losing a tremendous amount of land in Latin America, and by the time we get to 1868, Spain only holds on to three island territories: Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Philippines. They actually hold on to a very small little island in the Pacific as well called Guam. But regardless, they're holding on just to these three island territories. And all of these island territories are also looking for their independence. And one such star of the revolution in Puerto Rico is another woman by the name of Lola Rodriguez de Tio. Lola Rodriguez de Tio was already a very famous author. She was actually an author of many different things, but she was especially known for her poetry. And she would use her writing to criticize the Spanish control over Puerto Rico. She would talk about the heavy-handed tactics, the tyrannical tactics by the Spanish king. And because of this, she was actually banished from Puerto Rico. She went to Cuba, where she became once again a revolutionary leader there. She was then banished again from there. So she was a very, very prominent revolutionary leader in these rebellions against the Spanish and looking for independence. The Philippines is not in the Caribbean, it's in the Pacific, it's closer to Japan. But the Philippines was another place that has been controlled by the Spanish all the way since 1521. That was when Ferdinand Magellan arrived, claimed it for Spain, and called everyone there Catholic subjects of the Spanish monarchy. And it's going to remain a Spanish colony all the way until the U.S. steals it in the Spanish American War, which we'll talk about in our final unit. The problem with the Philippines is that right from the get-go, the Catholic Church really dominated the Philippines and controlled much of all political life and social life in the Philippines. All education had to be Catholic. And because of this, they used this as an agent to control the Filipinos because they would use religion as justification for their rule. And because of this, that enabled the Spanish to control the Philippines for 300 years, for longer than 300 years. However, when rebellions start is when many Creoles and mestizos, many people that have the money to be able to afford education outside of the Philippines, went to go get educated in Europe. When they went to education to Europe, they were exposed to Enlightenment ideals, and then they would come back and they would use these Enlightenment ideals to protest Spanish control over the Philippines. One revolutionary leader that went through this process was a leader by the name of Jose Rizal. Jose Rizal came back from going overseas and started to produce propaganda advocating for more control of the Philippines by Filipinos. He's arguing for greater autonomy. What that means is greater control over their own country. He's not arguing for independence. He's just arguing for greater control. And yet, by producing magazines and pamphlets and articles talking about Filipinos having more say in their own government, the Spanish are going to view him as a dangerous revolutionary. They're going to have him arrested. They're going to have him executed. And in that year, in 1896, that is going to cause the Filipinos to start a full-out rebellion against the Spanish. That rebellion against the Spanish is going to be one of the reasons in why the United States thinks that it would be safe to attack the Spanish and steal the Philippines from them, which they eventually do 2 years later. Okay, our last conversation is about the unification of Italy and Germany. This tends to be something that confuses students. And so I just kind of give you guys, as well as I can, a very simplified version of what happens here with the unification of Italy and Germany. First, a little context. Look at what is now Italy, the Italian peninsula. There are a bunch of different kingdoms in Italy. This is still the kind of the last remnants of feudalism in Europe. We have lots of Italian states that are controlled by very different kingdoms. And then the same of Germany. Germany is a bunch of different states. It was the Holy Roman Empire. It broke apart. Now it's Prussia, but you have all these German-speaking kingdoms around there. What these wars are going to be in the 1850s and 60s are wars to unify these two places, Italy and Germany, into one nation state. We have a successful ruler from each place that is going to use the same tactic to unify their respective states. And so if you look at it from that lens, it makes the wars of unification a lot easier. Keep in mind also that we're using nationalism to bring these people together because they have a pride of being Italian, and thus you want to unite these lands under one nation, under one nationalized people, into a nation state, if you will. So Count de Cavour, this is our prime minister of the Kingdom of Sardinia. If I'm showing you on a map, here we go, Kingdom of Sardinia here and here. He wants to unite the Italian peninsula under one Italian government. He's going to use the tactic of realpolitik. In the age of enlightenment, where everybody thinks that they have natural rights and individual rights and everyone should be respected, he says, that's nice, but I'm more of a realist. I am going to do whatever I can to get my political agenda done, even if it's immoral. That's what this, in practice, what realpolitik is. And because of this guy, Count de Cavour, is going to use this idea of realpolitik to try and manipulate two other countries to go into war so he can steal their land and unite the Italian peninsula. That's exactly what he does. He manipulates France to go into war with Austria as these two countries are fighting. These kingdoms up here are largely Austrian states. Austria is weakened in the Italian peninsula. He then is going to use the absence of Austrian force here to organize a plebiscite, a vote, and they are going to vote to join Sardinia and create a unified Italian peninsula. So this is using realpolitik to unite the Italian peninsula together, Italian nationalism. And we have one name we have to remember that's Count de Cavour. Excuse me. Now, of course, wars are expensive. And every time that there is a war like this, it's going to cause debt. Italy, a new state, didn't have a lot of money to begin with. And so the country is going to be struck with poverty very early on. And the result is that thousands of Italians are going to emigrate to places where they can have a better life. This is where we start to see big waves of Italians coming to the United States. Also, big wave of Italians are going to go to Argentina as well, where their government's actually encouraging immigrants to populate their lands. And then German unification, very, very similar to Italian unification. We have these different states that are German speaking, but they're all different kingdoms. And we have one leader, the leader of Prussia, that is going to try and unify all these German speaking states into one nation state. Otto von Bismarck. Otto von Bismarck is going to use realpolitik just like Count de Cavour did in order to do this. He's going to have to be really creative. He's going to have to kind of engineer 3 different wars. He convinces Austria to join Prussia to go to war with Denmark. He takes land from Denmark there with German-speaking people in it. Then Prussia is going to defeat Austria once again after weakened by the French. Then he's going to go in and defeat the French and steal land down here called Alsace-Lorraine, in which the French are very, very bitter about, thus starting our rivalry between Germany and France. And Otto von Bismarck is going to create a unified Germany in all of these lands here, and he will become the prime minister here of Germany. And this is another example of using realpolitik to create a nation state. Now, the Ottoman Empire is going to be weakened by nationalism because the Ottoman Empire, the last surviving of our gunpowder empires, is a very, very, they're just that. They're an empire. They have many, many different peoples with different nationalities. For instance, this upper yellow up here, this is in Europe, right? And so these people are namely Christian. They are not ethnically Turkish. They're not Turks. So these people are very different. These people are in Northern Africa over here. They're going to be very different, right? And so the Ottoman Empire is going to be weakened by nationalism because many of these places are going to want to rule themselves. And other states around them, powerful imperialist states, especially Russia, are going to look to free these peoples because it's going to benefit them in some way. And so first it will be the Greeks, and the Greeks are going to break away from the Ottoman Empire. And so the Greek Revolution begins. They're looking to gain independence from the Ottomans. And once the Greeks gain independence, many different countries in Southern Europe will also gain independence. Fatefully, one of those countries will be Serbia, aided by Russia. And then, of course, Austria-Hungary, the giants of the north, will try to take land from Serbia, and that's going to be kind of the start of World War I. And so that is epitomized here in our last slide. This is the Russo-Turkish War. And so we have people in this Balkans area, this southeastern Europe, breaking away from the Ottoman Empire. Russia, Austria-Hungary, they want to start adding lands to their empires that have now these newly independent countries. They're weak. They're ripe for the taking. Russia is going to help these countries get independent. And then Austria-Hungary is going to annex some of these countries, particularly this one, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Serbia is not going to be too happy about that. That will be a cause of World War I. So the Russo-Turkish War, it's the Ottoman Empire versus Russia. Russia is aiding these countries because they are Slavic. And the result is the Ottomans are defeated and these countries are now independent for now. The Ottoman Empire, frustrated that they are losing so much land. And so their government decides that the way in which to stop losing land, because many of these peoples that are breaking away are of different cultures, is to try to unify their empire under one culture. They advocate Ottomanism, which was trying to assimilate all of the peoples of the empire into one common Turkish society. Unfortunately, this is only going to drive more feelings of nationalism and cause more places to look to rebel against the Turks. All right, guys, here's your practice SAQ. One Enlightenment thinker who contributed to an increase in civil liberties from this time period. Besides white men, give me another group that benefited from the Age of Reason, and then give me one revolution that was inspired by nationalist ideas. All right, guys, that is it. I will see you guys very soon to go over these questions. We are about 9 days away from our AP test. So study hard, and I will see you guys soon. Bye, everybody.